Hey, it's Liberty, and today I'm going to be tier ranking all of the books that are currently going viral on booktok. Now, I don't have TikTok because I'm a millennial and therefore banned. Just kidding. But no, I have Instagram and I use Reels and I can spend an hour or two on there, God. I also have a bookstagram account, so do follow me on there. I'll put the link below. I've got the tiers all named. The top tier is leave it on repeat because everyone knows that's what you have to do to get content of the same kind. Just shows the app you really love it. Next is like and hope, where you really like it, give it a like and hope more stuff like that comes up. The neutral tier is just move on. There will be things that I like and dislike about all the books in that tier. Next is hanging out in the comments, because they are more interesting. And last is don't feed the algorithm. Swipe up as quickly as possible and just, don't want to get any more like that. Anyway, if you like this, do give it a thumbs up. I make videos all about books, history, personality, etc. So do check those out if you want. First of all, I'm going to say that I checked out lots of different websites and videos and spent a lot of time on bookstagram to just see all of the books that are currently trending, and I'm obviously only going to be talking about ones that I've read because I can recommend those or not recommend those, as the case may be. Once I made my list, I realised there's actually no books in the bottom tier don't feed the algorithm, so booktok is actually not doing a bad job. So on to the penultimate tier, which is hanging out in the comments. This is the one where it was all right. It was okay. Nothing really to write home about. I don't really see the fuss about these. I wouldn't really recommend them to people. The first is Turtles All the Way Down by John Green. Now, this book is all about Asa, who is trying to be a teenager whilst dealing with OCD and anxiety. This book does really well in showing the realities of day-to-day life with both of these things. That's the part that I think it did well and why it's not in the bottom tier. There is a missing person storyline that I never really got invested in. I liked Asa as a character, but I think this suffered mostly from The Fault in Our Stars being so good. And I liked Paper Towns. I didn't hate Paper Towns. And so I think I had a higher expectation for this book than maybe other people did, or maybe that I would have had for other books. I felt very disappointed after reading it. It's not awful, just not for me, and that's fine. Also in this tier we have We Were Liars. Now, this is a YA mystery novel. Essentially we follow the members of this family who are really well off, and they spend the summers growing up on this private island. The granddad is, the very rich patriarch, and we're focusing on the third generations, like the bunch of cousins that get together and hang out, and their parents are very obsessed with sort of getting the most out of their grandfather figure as possible, and wanting to be the heir, etc. But the cousins are just having a good time. They're drinking, they're getting on with things. Candace is our main character, and we sort of have the present, and 2 summers before this something has happened and everybody seems to know what it is apart from Candace, and no one will tell her anything. I'm going to be honest, I don't really remember much about this book other than the fact that it does have this really big twist to it. I came away thinking that something lacked in the execution. I think the style of writing, the way the prose is written, is you will either love it or find it extremely annoying, or maybe I guess just somewhere in between. It's just sort of doesn't really bother you, but I think it verged on the more annoying for me. I think if you're going to do that, you've got to do it really well. Again, I didn't hate it. I just didn't really like it, and I wouldn't really recommend it to people. So the next tier is my neutral tier, my just move on tier. This might be sacrilege, but the first book in this tier is Red, White and Royal Blue. I had high expectations of this book because I had been around loads of people who really loved it and still really love it to this day. There were aspects of this book that I liked and enjoyed, so it's in the neutral tier. This is a YA romance novel that sort of centres around the first son of the US and the, Prince Harry of the UK. It's enemies to lovers. They sort of have to fake a friendship, and then that sort of turns into this, long distance romance. yeah, I found both the characters quite annoying and I didn't really buy into their romance. Yeah, I mean, there were, characters that I really liked, and I really enjoyed the whole plot line, which was Alex's mother sort of running for a second term, and his role in that. Yeah, I know people loved it, but this is where I landed with that book, and yeah. Next in the neutral tier is A Thousand Splendid Suns. I had read The Kite Runner and really loved it, so I picked this book up. We follow two main characters, Mariam and Lila. They are sort of a generation apart and they live in Kabul in Afghanistan. This book sort of takes us through 30 years of time and their relationship, which sometimes is like sisters, other times like mother and daughter. It's split into 4 parts and we get Mariam's childhood. She was born in the 1950s, and then Lila, who was born in the 70s, and then the third part is where their lives intersect. And then the final part, which is sort of, the big climax of everything. And the beauty of this book is showing people the daily life of people who are living in Afghanistan during this time period the book covers, and I think that was executed really well, really down to the Titanic fever that swept the city. Yeah, so many people have a certain picture in their head when they think about Afghanistan, and the fact that we sort of get to see pre-Taliban, during Taliban is actually really refreshing, and you get to see how it affects every aspect of their lives. It's in the neutral tier because while I enjoyed it, there were, it was quite slow burning. It trundled along, and I sort of like things that are pick up a little bit and really get me immersed in the plot to have me keep going. And I don't think that did that in the way that other books have, but it is a great book, but just neutral for me. The next book in this tier is One of Us is Lying, which is a sort of YA mystery novel thriller-esque thing. There are 5 students who go into after-school detention, and one of them doesn't walk out alive. Simon has this blog where he was about to post sort of juicy gossip about all of these people, so they all become suspects in his murder. But did one of them do it? Are they being set up? These are the kinds of questions that you sort of go through the book wondering. For me, this is the neutral tier because I thought we really moved away from all of these labels that sort of I grew up consuming media about teens, but you very much had the brain, the jock, the criminal, and that sort of really wasn't for me. I think we're, these days we want a bit more nuance in our characters, and yeah, that's where it sort of fell down for me, because even though they were challenging those stereotypes, the fact that those stereotypes were even there in the first place was, that's not really what I would like to see. But then again, I am not a teen anymore. So what does my opinion matter? I watched the series on Netflix that came out recently, and actually I think I felt the same way about the series as I did about the book. Like, it was okay. Things happened and I watched them, but I wasn't amazed. I wasn't, taken for a ride in the way that I have been while watching other things. The last book in this tier is A Court of Thorn and Roses, and this is a Beauty and the Beast retelling. This is quite infamous. It's a series. There are 4 books. I've only read the first one. It's technically YA, but when I was a bookseller at Waterstones, I literally had to tell parents sometimes who were buying this book for their 12-year-old, please do not buy this for your 12-year-old. We are in a land where we sort of have a fae kingdoms. There are some humans living in the south. The main character is Feyre, and she is 19 years old. Like, I know she's under 20, like most YA fantasy heroines. She kills a wolf in the woods, and a beast-like creature turns up and sort of demands retribution. And so in payment for this life, he sort of takes her, and they go, and she lives in the Fae kingdom with him. And he turns out to be this incredibly handsome man who is also the sort of, leader of one particular court in the Fae kingdom. Of course, they fall for each other. It's steamy and fiery and all of this stuff. And Feyre sort of ends up being a part of politics in the Fae kingdom, and there is a threat to the fairy realm which has to be worked out. Next, I've got the like and hope tier. So when you come across a great reel and you like it and hope that more will show up like that. I'm going to start off this tier with They Both Die at the End. This is a YA sort of alternative reality future novel where technology has created something called Deathcast, where it knows the exact day that you're going to die, and at midnight it tells you you're going to die that day. Pretty scary. Our main characters are Mateo and Rufus, and they wake up at midnight and get a notification from Deathcast. In this world, there is an app for everything, including dying, and Last Friend is an app that was created so for people who want to spend their last day with someone, you can sort of match and then go and, try and have adventures in your last day. And Mateo and Rufus find each other on that app, and they, try and have as many adventures as possible and just enjoy themselves and have fun. And, they have a really nice connection. The interaction between the two of them was really lovely and heartwarming and heartbreaking. And honestly, I spent the whole book just hoping that the title was going to be wrong. And I'm not going to say whether or not I was, the title was proved right or wrong. That's for you to find out. But, I really, really enjoyed this, and they had great chemistry between the two of them, and you sort of get to try and watch the two of them get closure on, the people, the situations that they've, struggled with. And yeah, heartbreaking. Ugh. I wonder if it's going to be a film, because it would make a really good film, actually. Next in this tier is All the Bright Places, and this is another YA novel. This one is a sort of love story between two people who struggle with depression and, how they help each other through that. Theodore, lives day to day struggling with suicidal thoughts, and Violet is struggling with her sister's death and the aftermath of that. And she's counting the days where she can finish school and go to college and, move on with her life. They meet on the edge of their school's bell tower. They both save each other from making a sort of permanent decision. They both help each other. They become each other's strength. It's really moving and heartwarming, and you really feel for both of these characters. I gave it 5 stars at the time. I was a very depressed teen. So this probably resonated with me in a way that was maybe slightly unhealthy, but it has aged slightly for me, because I know now, being a grown-up, that there are certain things in this book which, but, it really helped me as a teen, and, made me realise that I wasn't alone, and there were people who were also struggling, and you can make your way through it, or at least try to make your way through it. I'm not even going to talk about the film adaptation. I think I watched the first half an hour and then didn't continue. I didn't like it. Moving on. Shadow and Bone is the next book in this tier, and this is a YA fantasy series where there are people who have magical abilities, and they are Grisha. Alina Starkov is the main character, and she is a soldier in the First Army of Ravka, along with her best friend Mal, and she is a cartographer. She is crossing this expanse one day with her unit called the Shadowfold, and it's this magical expanse with creatures and all sorts of darkness inside. And the lives of her whole crew and everyone on board is threatened, and she sort of unleashes this power that she doesn't realise that she has. She gets drafted into working out how to destroy the Shadowfold and, reuniting her country, because her country is, in the middle of a civil war. This book was really good. I really enjoyed the world building. I had already read Six of Crows, which is sort of set in this universe, but in a different area. The world building was great. And I feel like it is easier to read these Grisha novels before Six of Crows, because I struggled to get to grips with the magic system slightly. When I read Six of Crows, I had to sort of reread the first chapter a couple times just to sort of get my head around the magic system, but it's obviously really well explained in this book, and the characters were great. I loved Alina as a main character, and I think that I'm going to watch the show. I watched the show and loved it, and that's why I picked up this book. And I think I'm going to continue that way. I'm going to watch series 2 and then read the second book. Finally, the last book in this tier is the Selection series, and this is YA dystopian series, and it's sort of set in America after World War III. I read it recently. You might remember if you watch my channel. It's now called Ilia, and it's a monarchy, and essentially whenever the prince of Ilia, is going to get married, he sort of holds this thing called the Selection, where I think 35 girls sort of get chosen after applying, and they sort of have to not battle it out literally, but it's a competition, and the winner is going to marry the prince and, one day be the queen. This world has a sort of numbered caste system based on occupation, and our main character, America Singer, is a 5, and she is a performer. She sings, obviously, and plays lots of different musical instruments and that kind of thing. The Selection is a unique opportunity to escape the caste system, essentially. America applies for the Selection not really wanting it. She sort of thinks, if I can become a 3, that's great. But then I can, marry my boyfriend who is in the caste below me and be happy, and etc, etc. But when she meets the prince, they actually form an unlikely friendship. America as a protagonist was really great. I really enjoyed, as the series went on, I enjoyed it more. The sort of subplots of the rebellion, and because obviously with every dystopian society, there are rebels who want to dismantle it, and seeing that kind of thing from the perspective of the people who are in the establishment, America is living in the castle this whole time while all this is going on, is really interesting. And actually, I recommend this highly to people who love YA or dystopia or both. I think if you enjoy one or the other, it'll be a great addition to your bookshelf. The top tier is Leave It on Repeat. Literally when you love a book so much or a reel so much, you just want to reread it constantly or rewatch it constantly. And the first book in this tier is The 7 Husbands of Evelyn Hugo, which one of the best books that I've read in a really, really, really long time. This is a sort of normal fiction book, and Evelyn Hugo was a, Hollywood movie star in the golden age of Hollywood, and now she's retired and she's telling her life story to a journalist, Monique. Evelyn wants to reveal the truth about, her life, her career, her marriages, from moving to LA to, start her career, through to her decision to remove herself from the public eye. This story is so dramatic, full of twists and turns and unrequited and forbidden loves and friendships and families. Evelyn Hugo is such a complex and nuanced character, and you also follow Monique in the present day as she's, finding out about Evelyn's life, and their interactions have such an interesting dynamic. I really like the way they've chosen to tell this story, and one of my favourite books of all time. I mean, the insights into old Hollywood and what it would have been like, but also everything that, Evelyn goes through that she shouldn't have had to go through. So many aspects of that and her plot was just completely timeless and top mark. Next in this tier is A Darker Shade of Magic, and this is a fantasy trilogy, and it's one of my favourite fantasy series of all time. It's set in parallel Londons, all stacked next to each other, and Grey London is essentially our world. It's sort of like 1819, 1820-ish, and is home to Lila Bard, which is one of our protagonists, and she is like a pickpocket with a penchant for getting into trouble. And Kel is the adopted son of the royal family of Red London, and magic is very commonplace there. It's, an everyday thing. And he is basically sent on sort of ambassadorial missions to the other royal families of all the different Londons, because he has the magic to travel between the parallel worlds. When Lila and Kel literally run into each other, they sort of set off this chain of events that affects all the different Londons. I love the magic system in this. I love the fact that, Kel uses his blood to to move between the worlds, and I love the way the world expands as the trilogy goes on. The new characters we get, the new locations we get, including the hot bisexual pirate that we get in book 2. Really great, one of my favourite characters in the whole series. yeah, all the interactions between the different characters were golden. You know, the plot was very enjoyable, as well as Cal's magic. There's other different forms of magic. And yeah, I mean, the world building was just really, really, really solid. I was never lost. It was amazing. If you love fantasy, this is just it's a must read. The next book I'm going to talk about is Caraval, and this is also the first book in a fantasy series, also a fantasy trilogy, and also one of my favourite fantasy trilogies of all time. This book is about a magical circus game, and our two sisters are Scarlett and Tella, and Scarlett has always dreamed about attending Caraval, which is, it's a huge performance and circus where the audience participates and you can win or lose the sort of, big game, or you can just go and watch and enjoy the spectacle. Scarlett's father has arranged this marriage for her, and she feels like this is her last chance to attend Caraval. She receives an invitation and her sister Tella kind of whisks her off, and they end up at the carnival. Both sisters get involved in the game, and they sort of have to work out what's real, what's just part of the performance. There is romance in this. The mastermind behind Caraval is Legend, and, no one really knows who he is. He sort of hides himself in as part of the whole thing, and, very mysterious. This book is just full of magic, and it's really, really well written. The descriptions in this book literally grab all of your senses, and I've never been so engaged with, scenic descriptions before. It's just, I could feel everything. Next in this tier is Circe, and this is a retelling of the life of a figure from Greek mythology. And I really enjoy the fact that we are seeing this character from a different perspective, because traditionally she has sort of been maligned. She's a villain in all the myths that she's in, obviously written thousands of years ago, and was written in a time where women were put into certain boxes, and she was very much in witch, evil box. Circe as a character is just insanely well written. She is the daughter of Helios, who is the Titan sun god, and she doesn't really fit in with her family at all. She finds herself drawn to the mortal world and to witchcraft. Zeus, who's obviously the king of the gods of Mount Olympus, banishes her to a deserted island on Earth, where she makes a life for herself, and she crosses paths with many figures from Greek mythology that you will know, Icarus of wings fame, and Odysseus, and many more. There are lots of interesting dynamics in this novel. You've got the old gods and the new gods, and you've got gods and mortals and how they interact, and sort of men and women, and you just see all of it. And female power is something that is really celebrated in this novel, and Circe as a woman, as a person in her own right, is celebrated, and her motivations are clear and understandable, and it's so hard to judge her because there's no bias against her. This is her side of the story. Next in this tier is Six of Crows, which is the first book in a fantasy duology set in the same world as Shadow and Bone, but sort of like a different geographic location. Some of the same characters do appear in the second book, though. The start of this book is in Ketterdam, which is sort of a port trading hub, and we follow Kaz, who is the leader of a gang, and he's approached to pull off this heist, and he puts together a team to pull this off. There is romance and amazing friendships to enjoy, but also the plot is really good, and it moves along and never stops, and I had a major book hangover when I finished this, and I think I immediately read Crooked Kingdom, if I'm not mistaken, because I was just so impatient, and I never really do that. I always try to give myself a little, breathing room. Some of the characters include Inez, who's basically like a ninja. She gets called the Wraith because, she's gone before you realise she's even been there. There's also Jesper, who, very handy with a pistol, and Nina, who's a Grisha who can, manipulate living things and their heart. She's a heart render. She can sort of affect people's, hearts and heartbeat and stuff like that. I love these characters. I have spoken a few times on my channel, but a long time ago, about how much I love these characters. The six of them are so great as a unit, and all of their relationships, among the six of them are so well written, because some of them have met for the first time, some of them have known each other for years, and just exceptional. And obviously the plot was amazing, and I had no qualms about any of that or any of it, basically. Yeah, this is another one of my favourite fantasy series of all time. Next up is the 7 Deaths of Evelyn Hardcastle, 7.5 Deaths of Evelyn Hardcastle. I've definitely seen both, and I don't know if one was just for one print run and then they changed it, or I'm not sure, but Evelyn Hardcastle is death. If you're looking for a book that was awarded a lot, this is it. It was on most people's best book of the year list the year it came out. Agatha Christie meets Groundhog Day, essentially. Evelyn Hardcastle dies every night. And this is set in a country house where a bunch of people have been invited to a celebration that's sort of taking place in the evening. One of the guests is trying to solve the murder, work out who did it. But the trick is he wakes up in a body of a different guest every morning, and repeats the day from a different guest's perspective, essentially. And it's just such an intriguing concept, and I really think it was pulled off very well. Yeah, he has to solve the mystery before the person who is trying to stop him catches up to him. Yeah, I love Agatha Christie, I love mysteries, and this is one of the best mystery books that I've read. Next is The Secret History, which is a dark academia novel, which is set in a elite red brick college in America, in New England. And the protagonist, Richard, joins this college. He's studying classics, ancient Greek, and he basically manages to get into this really cliquey classics tutorial group, essentially, where this one professor sort of teaches all of the classes. He sort of handpicks the students. There are only 5 other students. They're learning everything about, all about the classics, philosophy, and the actual texts and the poets and everything like that. They're playing with the idea of living with an existence that is, of a higher ideals than the rest of society. One of these students gets murdered, and the first half of the novel is the events leading up to the murder, and the second half is obviously, the after effects and consequences and what happens to the group. Nietzsche definitely has influenced this book for sure. Someone called it a murder mystery in reverse, which, yeah, I see that. And again, the writing style is very poetic, and this book definitely popularised the dark academia genre. It's one of the best books I've read, and yeah, it really deserves a place on everyone's bookshelf. The way that it's written, the style, maybe isn't for everyone, but give it a go. Once it sort of grasps hold of you, you can't get out, you can't escape, you'll be reading until the end. Finally, the last book in this tier is The Night Circus, and this is a fantasy novel about a magical circus that is only open at night and full of real magic. Things like a cloud maze and an ice garden, things like that. It sort of appears and disappears without warning. Celia and Marco have been trained from a young age by their respective mentors to one day fight it out in a duel, but unfortunately one of them will not survive this. They don't know this. There's a Romeo and Juliet sort of style romance in this. They fall in love, and, like everything in this book, it is just really magical. Again, this book is really beautiful. I want to reread it soon, actually, because I read this before I read Caraval, and obviously they're quite similar. And I was I love Caraval. It's one of my favourite series that I've ever read. I am wondering if this book holds up in comparison. So that was my ranking of all the books that are currently trending on booktok, bookstagram, and yeah, my take on all of them. Thank you for watching. If you have made it all the way through to the end, then do let me know if you've read either Caraval or The Night Circus and which one that you preferred. This is pretty successful. I think because I don't get my recommendations directly from booktok or bookstagram, I think that has obviously skewed more towards the positive end. I might do a video where I do take some recommendations straight from bookstagram and, evaluate them and see if it really can be trusted. Look out for that. If you like this, do give it a thumbs up, and I make videos all about books, history, personality, etc. So do check those out and subscribe if you want to. Happy reading!